So, Kate, one thing that gets me every time I look at childcare options is this NQS rating stuff and what the hell the difference is between a centre that's meeting expectations versus exceeding. Like, what is the difference?
Yeah, Anika, because, any service that has managed to get themselves an exceeding rating, they are proud and they will be showing that badge of honour everywhere, online and on the fence out the front. But should we disregard other services that maybe don't have such a high NQS rating? I really wonder. And if they do have an exceeding rating, does that mean they're fabulous in every area?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of confusion, especially even from my end. And I think we've got to get someone in to chat to us about this. So I'm so excited to be introducing our next guest, Elise. Joining us today is Elise Disher. She is a highly experienced in early childhood. She's a former educator, former centre director, and now an in-demand consultant and a mum of almost 3. Elise is here to help us break down NQS ratings in plain English so you can finally understand what those labels mean for your childcare choices. Welcome, Elise.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Elise, I'm going to launch straight in with the first question. Tell us, what is the NQS, or the National Quality Standard? We see it plastered all over the front of different early learning services, but I do wonder, does everyone actually know what is behind those letters?
The NQS is a set of standards that all early childhood providers must meet or be working towards meeting. We are a regulated profession and industry, and so these guidelines are sort of a benchmark of what all early childhood providers need to be providing, knowing that it was developed through research and evidence about what is really important when it comes to looking after young children.
Can I ask you then, who puts together the NQS or the standards? We know there's 7 standards. Who writes them?
Well, a lot of people. So the National Quality Standard was introduced around 2012 with a bunch of lead thinkers in the early childhood space, along with the regulatory body, the ASIQA, we call it. ASIQA. And I would put a lot of trust in the people that put it together. It's been reviewed. It constantly has people critically thinking about what it is that is important and what we should be focusing on. And it's quite broad. It includes a lot. It's quite overwhelming. Yeah. So I guess for families listening, it's not important that you know about every single standard. It's more about understanding that we are regulated, and every early learning centre, although they can implement different practices, there's still a bench line as to what is expected.
Speaking of that bench line, I know that there's different sets of meeting expectations, exceeding expectations. What is the difference between those? Is it kind of like good, better, best? How does it work?
Yeah, so there is a variety of ratings. The most common that you will come across is working towards the standards meeting or exceeding. There is also significant improvement required. So if you tour a centre and we call it a SIR. A SIR. So if you come across a centre that is rated with a significant improvement required, then that would be your red flag of, okay, what's actually going down here? And I need to investigate exactly how that centre's being supported and what context was provided to give them that. So that brings me to what most families are really wanting to get is the exceeding rating. I want a centre close by that has availability that I can afford that is also an exceeding centre. The reality is that the snapshot and the report, it's kind of like a report card that centres get. There's an element of that is just a snapshot of a moment in time and a judgment based on performativity at times. Now, regulatory bodies are very good at seeing a bit of a show and like sort of seeing through performance. However, there's still an element of the difference between exceeding and meeting that we kind of need to take with a grain of salt.
Can I maybe just get you to back up for 1 second, Elise? Because I feel like we skipped a really important part in that we know services are given an NQS rating. We've talked about the different ratings that they can get.
Yes.
But who gives them this rating and when?
Yeah. That's a good question. And I'd love to just keep talking about like the standard and like that rating scale in general, so people can have some like clarity and a bit of confidence in seeing the meeting rating as well, because meeting is what I haven't looked at recent stats, but most of your centres are going to be meeting. And that's actually a really good sign. If a centre is meeting, the standards, as I said, there's so many of them. Many of them are actually about documentation and proof of practice. And so the fact that they might be doing it in practice and then they're also taking the time to like document that and provide timelines of how they've progressed over the years, and then they will get a meeting for that. The exceeding is going above and beyond that.
So it's a lot of work involved even in just getting that meeting.
Just to get meeting is really actually quite a commitment from an early childhood team. So I wouldn't, although exceeding is beautiful and you're probably going to find that there's practices that are more embedded, that they're feeling more passionate about. They might be working in more of that advocacy space around improving the bar for all centres and for Australia worldwide. And that's fantastic. And there are many of those centres. But if a centre is meeting, it doesn't mean that they're not also maybe implementing some really great things that...
Yeah, so don't scratch them off the list just because they're meeting.
No.
But this brings me to my question. What in the world is then working towards? Because it feels like childcare is the only industry where you can be working towards, like imagine in hospitality, I'm working towards a hygiene status. You wouldn't be running. Like what is working towards
like
then?
in a hospital, like we're working towards making sure you're actually asleep before we operate on you.
Exactly. Like you mentioned the SIR, which is like major red flag, but what about the working towards?
Yeah, so working towards would be a clue to ask a few more questions.
Okay.
And to just say, I noticed that maybe you were rated as working towards in quality area 3, which is all just about environments and resources and setups. Can you tell me about how you're improving in that area and why they didn't think you were meeting? And they might say, you know what? It's actually because our outdoor areas, because we're in an inner city suburb, our outdoor area is actually quite pokey and small, and they thought that we weren't utilising that space to the maximum benefit that we could. So sometimes, or it might be about documentation, like they might be being with the children and experiencing all this beautiful learning, but they're kind of forgetting to document that and to write about it. So then when an authorised officer, who is the people that come out and assess the centre, when they're looking for, okay, so is this just today practice or is this everyday practice? Then that's when they're falling back on wanting to see documented evidence. And so if the centre is so busy just being with children, having a great time.
Doing their jobs.
And they're not able to show this really good, like if you think about high school, like if they don't have this beautiful project book, then they could get a working towards, even if in practice they're actually doing it.
I think that's a really good point you make, Elise. So it is ask more questions. Don't rule it out just because of that. That's really good advice. I like that.
Yeah. And you'll also be able to see, you get an overall rating, which it's like a report card. So if you imagine you're doing 7 subjects in high school and you did really poorly in maths, it's going to bring your overall do they call it an ATR?
Well, just your overall score will be brought down in that one area where you perhaps haven't scored so highly. So I suppose advice to parents who are wondering whether there's something maybe not quite right with a service based on an NQS rating, it pays for them to go in and have a look and see in all of the 7 quality areas, where have they been sort of marked down, and then ask the question, I see that you haven't scored very highly in this quality area. Can you tell me how you're working on improving it? I think we talked with Cass, the childcare concierge, about the, what do we call it? The QIP?
The QIP.
The quality improvement plan. So everyone's required to have a quality improvement plan, and that is great advice.
Asking to see it when you go on a tour. It might shock some of the centre directors when the parent goes in for a tour and says, may I see your quality improvement plan. But you absolutely have every right to ask if you are wondering about the NQS, right?
Absolutely.
And they would have to have it there somewhere easily retrievable to share with you. Is that how it works?
Yeah, it's a regulation that it's accessible.
Okay.
So there's often talk within the sector around what does accessible mean. So it doesn't necessarily need to be there in plain sight on a wall
like in
display.
a binder folder in plastic pockets on
as
display.
long as it's accessible when it is requested to be viewed. So they might say, oh, fantastic. We've only got a digital version. Come have a seat in our coffee room and we'll set it up for you. You can have a look through and I can talk you through what we're working with. So yeah, it does need to be available.
Elise, if I'm being really picky, should a parent be able to go into a service and talk with any of the educators or staff in that service about what areas they are working on improving and expect that person will be able to contribute something?
I would say absolutely in a perfect world.
In a perfect world, yes.
We should be able to just go and ask anyone.
Yeah.
The complexity that comes from that is that there's so many different plans and improvement plans. And so we've got our quality improvement plan. And coming from a consultancy point of view, if this podcast was for early childhood educators, my answer would be yes, absolutely.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely. However, I also know the flip side around the current condition of the sector, how overworked, and there's just a lot of pressure on people. So I do wonder that if you did ask them, that potentially what they say back to you is not a true reflection of what they know, because that might just catch them off guard. And we all know what that feels like, right? When someone asks you a question, you're like, and you walk away and you think, why didn't I just say this? Or why didn't I just say that? So if you were to ask people about what they're working on, I would probably just say it in a real humanistic way.
Yeah.
Like what are you currently working on in your room to make it better?
Yeah, rather than a test.
Yeah, and they might be like,
rating.
we're currently like redoing our sandpit because we realize that we're always just using like buckets and spades. So we've been getting the dinosaurs out and we've got these like a parent that's bringing in like the plumbing PVC pipes so the children can explore.
Hearing an answer like that makes me feel so happy. Like I would be thrilled because that shows that educator is passionate. They are working towards improving things and making really wonderful learning experiences, and they know these little people who they're caring for. Like that ticks lots of boxes for me. So it's always good to ask questions and see what kind of answers you get back. And I'm thinking about how you said when you put someone on the spot and you ask them a question like that, we get nervous and we get muddled, and what we say is maybe not a true reflection of what we know or what we do. So would you say it's fair to say it's the same for a director who is having their assessment, their quality assessment, when what do you call them again?
An authorised officer. We call it AO.
AO.
You need to think of like the Australian Open.
I can manage to remember that. So do they know when an AO is coming to pay their service a visit?
Yeah. So the system that we work under has changed recently. So you used to get quite a bit of notice, up to a few weeks, a month.
Yeah.
And now it's a really quick turnaround. So you'll get a few days, up to a week maybe at max.
But do they give you a date or like it's a time frame?
Now that's pushing my understanding because I'm not working in centre. So people often say, I believe you get a date still, but
less lead up time to that date.
Yeah, or it might be a window, but I'm going to be honest here and go, I haven't worked in a centre and had to expect my notice. I haven't been in that seat for so long, but I'm pretty sure that, you definitely get a few days notice and you will know that it's happening within a very small time frame. I'm pretty sure that they still give you the date. When I was
when you were doing
in my day.
But I suppose that comes down to how often are these audits or checks happening? Like, is there a specific time frame they need to happen within?
We know that there's like an ideal time, or what we read on the ASEQA website, like the 3 years is the time frame between check. But we've also heard that at the moment, this can be stretched out to like more like 4 years between assessments.
Yeah, or 5.
Or 5.
Or more.
What does that depend on where your service is located? Like, what does it depend on? Like, Or are there not enough like AOs working in a certain area? Like, how does that work?
It's a great question because I think it's something that we definitely need to be thinking about when you're looking online, especially if you're not going into the centre and you're not ready to be asking questions, when you're just sort of skimming, your website, for example, that we take into account when the assessment was actually done. There is no, so we're quite regulated. However, there is no regulated
every 3
guideline.
years on the dot.
There is no. So the rule of thumb is 3 years. Like people say 3 years, but there's nowhere in writing that says that the department needs to do their official assessment every 3 years. So it's a roundabout.
I don't think people know where the AOs come from, that it's state-based, right? Am I right? Like every department, like the Department of Victoria has their own AOs and they send them out, right? And then New South Wales has their own AOs. Is this beyond you? Sorry, I wrote a blog article a while back, so I was just wondering.
I learned so much.
But I guess I can't ask you, you can't throw New South Wales under the bus because or the ACT shit, so they don't do it regularly. So we can skip that. But I'm pretty sure the AOs, that's how they...
in Victoria, it's the Department of Education and Training, which is the short word for that. Everything in the early childhood sector is...
the department.
An acronym.
Yeah. And it's
so we call it DET. D-E-T.
Okay, DET.
So DET in Victoria
are the authorised officers that can come out roughly every 3 years. And to answer the question around, well, who gets what and how often, it really depends on whether a centre is flying through with nothing's been reported, there's been no complaints, there's nothing that would make the department say, oh, we need to go and check and support and make sure this centre is doing okay. So centres that have no red flags from their perspective perhaps would spend longer. If you get an exceeding rating, you're probably if they're backlogged, then they're going to go to a centre that was working towards before.
It makes sense because they've got more room to improve. Yeah.
Do a lot of the AOs come from early education backgrounds? Would they have been teachers before or...
I feel like they're mystery shoppers.
Yeah,
in my head, they are mystery shoppers that come around and
you've met them. You obviously would have come across them.
Yeah, and I know some.
So who are these unicorns that we hear about? Because it's a tough job. I just want to say, if you go through those standards, my goodness, it's you asked me something before about what it includes, and it's every tiny detail, are the locks on the kitchen cabinets sound or electrical sockets, do they have those little safety thingies poked in them, right? It is that nitty gritty. And to go into a service that you've never seen before and be able to tick off all these tiny things, that is a huge task. And you don't want to mess it up. You don't want to give a great rating to a service that maybe it doesn't deserve it, right?
There's two ways to look at that as well, because there's the compliance stuff, which is kind of what you are talking about, things that we can go down a list and we can tick off.
Tick it off, yeah.
And the sector it's a relational based sector. We are working with humans, our tiniest, most vulnerable humans. And so much of what they're actually being required to assess is relational. And so that's a really tricky job. So to answer the question, my interpretation of who are authorised officers they are usually experienced in early childhood education and care. However, they aren't unicorns.
Yeah.
They are people. They are educators who are looking, everyone has a different reason why they come to a profession, right?
Yeah.
Something else to take into consideration is that we all come into our assessments. So as a parent, when you go to assess a centre, when I go into assess a centre, or whether an AO, and there's things if anyone is familiar with my work, which you probably aren't, but if you were, I have created my own business company founded on the importance of relationships with children. So guess what I'm looking at when I go into centres?
Because that's
your focus.
Where your values
exactly. And so if I go and choose to be an authorised officer, if I see something that doesn't meet my value, I'm going to rate it harder than someone that is naturally a bit less, maybe they get really excited over beautiful environments and sustainability
and the physical things you
how
can
are
see.
you protecting Australia? And so they're going to go in with that lens. So we have to remember that this is one person's, at the end of the day, it is just an opinion.
Yeah.
Based on what they're given. They've got
criteria.
guidelines and obviously supports to give specific examples of how they can make their decision
Make
about
their
ratings.
judgments, yes. But at the end of the
we're
day,
all human. Yeah.
You mentioned how your kind of passion point, I suppose, and your work is mostly about relationships. That's one of the areas. It's about collaboration and relationships with families. I think it's one of the lower, 6. I think it's area 6. Am I right?
Good job.
Yes, I nailed it.
Anika.
How do you measure that? Because if you go into a centre, I suppose you could say, we've got an app and we send emails, but how could you possibly measure families' connections with the centre? What are they looking for when they're, marking you against that?
Exactly.
Also
area.
remembering that we talked about how it is one person's opinion, the AO, the assessor's opinion, but also you mentioned earlier it's a snapshot in time. And it could be a snapshot in a time frame of 3 to 4 to 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Whew, lots can change in that time. And we know with little people, we know in any workplace, like things change from day to day. So gosh, we're asking a lot. We're putting a lot of importance on this NQS when really what you're saying is have a look at it. Yes, take it into consideration, ask questions about it, but be mindful that there's a lot to consider. It's not the be all and end all, I guess, when you're trying to make a decision about whether a service is going to be right for your family.
Spot on. It's a piece to the puzzle.
It's a piece of the puzzle.
One piece to the bigger puzzle.
How early childhood appropriate of you, Elise.
exactly.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to spring back to the question because I have to know your answer.
Yes.
How do you measure relationships and communications with
Yeah,
family
this
when
is
the
your
family
area
members
of
aren't
expertise.
necessarily there on the audit day?
Exactly.
Wait,
How do they do it?
Are we going from a parent's perspective?
No,
or do
from
we
the
want it
auditors.
from an AO? Okay, from
From
the
the,
AO.
from the
Okay.
auditor's perspective,
So
how
for
are they doing
anyone
it?
listening, one of the quality standards is about relationships with families and communities.
Yeah. That's the one.
And so when an authorised officer is there, they may see 1 or 2 drop-offs
Okay.
or pickups, and they will be tuning into that very short moment in time and how connected that support feels. So that's just one tiny bit of how they will assess that. But much of it is going to be question and answers because they do sit down and interview the educational leader and the nominated supervisor and ask these questions about, tell me how you get families involved. This again is where documentation and a centre's ability to keep evidence is going to become really handy. So I think back to a time when I was a director and we were talking about a centre philosophy, and educators, parents, children all have input into our values and the way that we wanted to approach our programs. And then we thought, but parents, just because Anika says this doesn't mean that another person's going to feel the same.
Yeah.
So, and then on enrollment, we were getting the all about me forms, like, what my child likes. My child likes dinosaurs and the Gruffalo, et cetera, et cetera. And then so what we ended up doing after critical reflection is creating a parent philosophy values statement handout thing that families were encouraged to do every year. So we could actually understand, well, what do you care about?
Yeah.
What does this family care
As
about?
a family, yeah.
Because we just thought it wasn't authentic to just make a decision about what families wanted from us. And so when I was rated, of course, that was one of the examples of exceeding practice.
Of course.
That we went above and beyond to partner with our families rather than just say, yep, we got, here's some surveys we sent out to families before we wrote our centre philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
We said, actually, we thought that was a bit mediocre. So we actually got individual ones, and the key educators of those parents would have access to that. So then they knew, okay, my son's name's Banks. I'm going to say Banks's mum doesn't really care about ABCs. All she wants is someone to love on her child.
Yeah.
So then they know, like, when at the end of the day, I want to know about all the connection stuff and all that lovey-dovey stuff. I don't really care that he doesn't know his colours, for instance.
See, I find that so interesting because that's one of the quality standards that from a parent's perspective would be like, yes, I want to make sure they're exceeding. But when you think about it and how they are judging that, I think I'd rather read parents' real reviews of their connection with the centre and if they were happy with the educators and stuff, because like you say, while they have it's based a lot on documentation and things rather than that real quality connection, and everyone has a different connection because your kids are different, you're different. But yeah, it's so interesting.
And like, you know, there's all different ways that idea around family connections is going to be assessed. And if a centre does send out surveys or they send out we'd love your review, or they might have a little box at the front with suggestions.
Yeah.
The centre is, I guess we're sort of trained to prepare to prove our worth.
I know.
And so we will keep all of that stuff. But then, you know, you might have people or a centre that is doing all of those things, but they're not so worried about
because they just
performing
know
on the day.
that they have the relationships. Because like to me, I would have
yeah.
expected them to be interviewing families, like pick a couple of families at random, maybe the ones that we're doing the drop off, and be like, can we quickly get you for a 5-minute interview? We want to talk to you about your connection you have with this place. But it's not that. It's
no, I don't.
too
well,
practical.
I've never heard of that.
No, I was
like
about
maybe.
to say, it might, but that's like, as a parent reading the standards who hasn't worked in the industry, I'm like, surely that's what they'd have to do to measure that.
Anika, it's a new job for you, my friend.
No, I'm just making more work for the people that are already overworked.
Because they don't have enough standards. We'll add an 8.
We will add an 8.
Quality area.
Yeah, please don't.
We have enough.
I guess though, considering how I actually just want to clarify, when we've mentioned that it's a moment in time, this assessment, when the AO comes out and assesses and then gives the quality rating or the NQS rating, that it's a moment in time, except services and directors and staff and educators, they are working, ideally, they are working every day between assessments to meet or ideally exceed the standards, right? Like it guides their everyday practice from like the smallest of things in the day to like the biggest, right? Like every area of a day in an early learning service is guided by the NQS. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And so we're always working on the standards, like every day. It's not something like, oh gosh, our 3 years is coming up. We should be expecting an assessment soon. Quick, let's dust everything off and get ready and make sure we've got everything printed so we're ready to show and learn the things to say. Like ideally, you want to see them doing these things every day in every little part of their practice, right?
Ideally, yeah.
Ideally.
But, you know, I kind of, when you were talking, I was thinking about like, what do we do when we've got a visitor coming over or when we've got Christmas? We do dust off. You know, we will
dust off to make sure we're looking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the reality is that there will be, if people care,
yes,
because we do that because we care, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so if people care, they will hustle around the year that their assessment is due. It doesn't mean that when their assessment is not due that the practice is necessarily bad. Yeah. And unfortunately, you know, you really want to get into the centres and spend a bit of time in there and have a sort of an extended orientation period so you can see the real practice as a parent.
An everyday day. Yeah.
But a big part of my work is this idea of like good enough is good enough, and we're working with young children.
Yeah.
And so to be perfect every day is actually impossible. Yeah, like assessment week, the centre is probably going to look a little better.
Because that is always my thought too, like is the assessment like an overview of something that's staged? Or is it organic? And because you've got kids there, can you actually you can try and stage it, but is stuff going to pop up anyway?
Yeah. So there's like, you know, funny stories about like simple things. So what we would all want for our children. And then I think about myself as a mother and I'm like, oh, well, am I even meeting that standard? But we would like to see that all children are washing their hands before they have morning tea, right?
Yeah, right.
And so an AO might come in and the centre is going, come on, everybody, let's go wash our hands. And the children are at the trolley grabbing their bowls and their cups and they're like completely not even cluing in.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to see through those basic practices that are performative. To answer your question around, can you just put on a concert? I don't think there's a black and white answer of yes and no, but I will say that it is impossible to go from really poor practice to really high quality practice.
In the space of a few weeks.
Yeah. And the National Quality Standard is actually asking so much of us intentionally about what we consciously do, intentionally do, and these things happen over time and children will give those clues that something's embedded or whether it's not. For instance, a small example that I'm thinking about is we had mixed age groups. So, in a standard early learning centre, you've got your nursery, your toddler, your kinder. And I'm talking 15 years ago, but I remember that we had the kinder children were just so interested in babies. Yes. We had lots of siblings coming along, and all of those things were happening. And they really had this deep desire to dress babies and wrap babies and do all of that. And they were doing that through role play. And then we were like, we've actually got babies in their community. They're just on the other side of the building. Yeah. Like, how can we make this connection between our community of learners? So we had times of the day where the older children from kinder would come to the nursery and they would help with mealtime. They would help with making the beds. And it was just such a beautiful practice. Mm-hmm. And we would have done that on our assessment. And that, again, would have been something that they saw that was, that's above and beyond.
Special, yeah.
But we wouldn't have been able to do that a week before, right?
Of course, yeah.
That
it takes planning.
Ages.
Yeah.
Because we would have had, in reality, when we first started implementing that, we've got, it was only a small kinder room. I think we had 16 at max. But we would have had all 16 children wanting to come over and help the 8 babies, which, the novelty wears off over time. Mm-hmm. And the children that have that true nurturing, just natural desire, they would continue with that offering. Whereas other children were like, no, go hang out in the monkey bars.
Yeah,
they weren't interested. And so, you can't fake the real good stuff.
That's really good advice, because I was worried that you get staged, but I suppose you can't. And it's like when they say don't film with children and animals because you can't control it. Probably similar thing, right?
Yeah. I also think this is true for parents going to a service on a tour. That's our main thing that we say here is like go and see as many services in real life as you can. Start online, fab, but like then go and actually be in there. And the feeling you get, it's really hard to fake the vibe and the relationships. Like, I think that's really important for parents to know that, it's really an important thing to consider is the way you feel when you go into that service. And if it feels good, then that's probably real. So like listen to yourself. And like you said, go back and do a little bit more of an extended stay and hang out and see what's happening on that day, because no day will be the same. And trust your gut a little bit. Yeah. And also look at other things aside from the NQS rating in your decision making.
Yeah, that gut feeling that you're talking about, that's like many pieces of your puzzle.
Yes, the puzzle pieces.
All the little values, if all 3 of us walk through a centre, we're all going to notice different things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so your pieces that you're adding to the puzzle mean the most. They're your biggest parts.
Now, I know we've done gut feel, but just to wrap it up, I want to talk to you and put your mum hat on rather than your professional hat on, because being a mum of 2, almost 3, I really want to know this. If I am that parent that is just looking at the ratings, so I'm just at the stage where I'm looking at websites. As a parent, if you were looking for childcare for your next kid, what are the kind of sections that are going to be the things that you're looking out for? Like, what do you think is most important? Because you've got 7 areas there.
Yeah.
What are the ones you're going to be grilling?
Quality area 5.
What is
quality? Which is relationships with children.
Okay. That's the one you mentioned before, Anika.
So what we can, if you're like me and you're a bit of a, oh my gosh, I just want that nurture, and I know that, that responsiveness is what builds my young child's brain. If you're like really keen on that, then National Quality 5 is the priority. And what I'm looking for when I go into centres is a really easy way to think about it is being and doing. What percentage of people, adults, are being with the children and connected and they're engaged? And what's the percentage of people that it look like they're quite busy just doing tasks or routines? And that gives me a clue about how the general culture and atmosphere is for those children.
And
on a day-to-day basis.
And how supported those educators in each room are, I suppose, by their service director or manager, and then again by the larger, what do we call them? Like maybe if there's a head office.
Yeah, it depends on the organisation. It's a culture, right?
Yeah.
A culture of care. Pedagogy of love, like there's all these things that we talk about. If we want educators to be filling children's cups, there needs to be someone filling their cups.
Yeah.
It's a flow-on effect, of course. For me, I can feel that. But I think what the benefit of when I'm touring a centre versus one of the listeners touring a centre is that it's the only thing I've ever known. So I feel very confident in my assumptions about a centre, whereas a parent, because it feels like you are a complete duck out of water, you're like, whoa, what? It's like a whole nother universe. And they start talking, the educators start talking this jargon and you're like, whoa, like it's easy to get confused with your gut feeling and, oh, it's just me. Like I just don't know how it works in here. So maybe that's normal. Or you might see something happening and be like, oh, well, I guess they have to do that because, I never thought of it. And you talk yourself out of it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so really tuning into whatever it is that comes up and then trying to make sense of that. Also, and knowing that when it comes to children's well-being, that you should really trust yourself and not normalize bad practice.
See, I think as well, and this is to Kate, you mentioned it before about the importance of looking at multiple centres, because I know I went to a sessional kinder with my kids and it was just like one of those beautiful community kinders, but they didn't have toilet doors and like it was a glass room and there's all these stalls and I don't know what it was, but I was freaked out. I was like, why do they have doors? Like I get their mini toilets, but where are the doors? And then I went to another tour and the same thing. And I was like, oh, I'm totally freaking out about something that is not. But by going on that extra tour, I was like, okay, I get it now. And I remember just as a first-time parent, like some things spin you out that you don't really need to pay attention to, but then like you say, other things actually might be important or they might not be doing something to the standard you want them to be doing that for your child. So
And also we can advocate for better practice because, I know you're having Christy McVie on.
Yes.
And many centres will now have doors because people spoke up and said, hang on a minute, what about the child that wants privacy or the family that really values a closed door while their child goes to the toilet? And so I'm thinking about the community kinder that my children go to. I'm not going to give them a plug, but they are just, chef's kiss.
Good.
But I'm picturing there because most of their toilets are open, but there are, now I'm questioning myself, but there are options for doors. Yeah, and they're just small because it's about supervision, right?
Of course
they're
it
young
is. You
children.
need to be able to see the top of their head, for instance.
So the doors that
little
we would
dividers
see,
and things. There's lots of different ways.
Or a little screen. So some centres don't have a big maintenance budget, but maybe they've got one of those cheap IKEA little screens that children can choose to if they prefer to have some privacy.
And again, if you go into a service and you see that and you're wondering why on earth are there cheap IKEA screens in the bathroom,
ask the question.
You can ask the question.
Yeah.
Like,
and
what's
that's
that
a big
about?
point
And that
too.
would tell you so much about the intention and where the values are of those educators, right?
I think so.
I want to answer the rest of your question because I got stuck stuck on my special interest.
Which one?
Relationships with children.
Relationships with
I got
children.
stuck there, but your question was what standards do I think?
Oh, yes.
If
okay.
you're overwhelmed by looking at this whole 7 standards, that's a lot, right? So I look at first relationships with children. The next one is quality area 2, which is about safety. So sometimes I lose my safety hat because I'm so caught up with being in the moment that I forget that there's important things. So if you've got a child who is medically complex or that you have a strong value around safety in any aspect, physical or emotional, quality area 2 is what you want to be looking at. And then so I look at, is my child relationally safe? Which is quality area 5. Are they emotionally safe, which goes part and parcel, which is quality area 2? And are they physically safe? And then the last one is quality area 1, which is the quality of the program. And so are there, and to keep it really simple, are there interesting things for children to explore? If I was a little one or you're looking through the lens of your child, would my child want to play here? Because when children are playing, they're learning. So if it looks interesting, that's what quality area 1 is all about. But then if you want to go a bit deeper, you might ask them, well, how do you make decisions about the interesting things that you're providing for children? How often do you rotate them around? How often are new things brought in, or is this the everyday? And get their feedback.
I don't want want to say goodbye to Elise because I have so many more questions for her, but maybe come back and talk to us another time. Thank you so much for being with us. And next time, I guess you'll bring some friends along with you, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I would love to come back. And yes, I'm having a little girl, so maybe she can join us.
We would love that.
Best wishes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elise.
Thank you. And I will drop Elise's details if you want to check out her website and her socials in our show notes. Thank you again, Elise, for coming and chatting with us.
You are so welcome.